what is the why behind what I'm doing? Because if you understand your why, then the how becomes way more powerful. And the little things that would trip me up and might, derail someone, it's not going to derail me because I know the bigger picture, or I have the understanding of what I'm truly trying to accomplish. And I believe it just gives you tremendous inertia.
So welcome back to another episode of Momentum Matters. This is John Gamatis, and I'm joined today by Exit Momentum founder and head coach Cullen Talley, and our guest for today, Zed Williamson. Let me give you a little backstory on this episode before we get started. So we've had a lot of conversations between Cullen and myself about business owners and entrepreneurs. A lot of this comes back to the lessons that they've learned, the challenges they've encountered, the wins, the failures, all the stuff that goes into being a founder and an owner. And we wanted a way using Momentum Matters to share some of those stories. And really what we came back to was the best way to do that would be to invite some owners and founders onto Momentum Matters and let's have some conversations with them, which leads us to today. So today we're excited to welcome Zed Williamson to Momentum Matters. Originally from Silicon Valley, Zed founded TrackableMed in 2011. He's the co-host of the Medical Sales Accelerator podcast, and most recently launched a new company, Physician Growth Accelerator, all experience that he's going to bring to the table today. So welcome, Zed. We're excited to have you here. And with that, let's go. We're just going to dive right in. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you get started in all this?
So originally, I got into the radio world. College really wasn't a thing that was built for me at the time, but I tried going to it. I was basically a 9-month dropout. The reason is I was working so many hours to pay for everything, it just didn't make sense. I saw spoiled kids walking around campus with their gigantic cellular phones in the 1990s, and I'm just sitting here going, what the heck am I doing? And so I was working a lot of jobs, and I came across improv comedy, started doing that, which introduced me to radio, and from there, I just really got interested, and this is going to sound like a strange stretch, in business. And the reason is because in radio, I started out in like being on the air. The problem is you get fired all the time. They change the format. I'm looking around at other people who are on the air, and I'm realizing that's not the life I want to live. And so I went into production, and production is writing and audio design. And that's when I learned about business, because I would interview business owners to be able to create messaging that would persuade other people to spend their money with those business owners. And so that's really where I kind of understood and loved the idea of just my curiosity was getting fed by interviewing business owners all over the place. I ended up moving to New Orleans, and I was considered good in the industry. That got to my head a bit. So early 20s, and the company I was working for was taking some of the work that I was due, and they'd ship it around the country and go, hey, model it after this. This is what good is. And one of the projects I was working on was completed, and I'm driving home with my girlfriend, and she's not my wife, so it worked out. But one of my projects came on the air, and I said, hey, babe, check this out. This is that thing I spent so much time working on and all my effort and expertise. And she started listening, and about 3 seconds in, she started talking about something. And I look at her, I look at the radio, and I'm like, my art, what are you doing? You can't listen while talking. And she just goes, oh, no, it's cute. And that's when I just realized I was a total fraud, because she was the target audience. She should have been enthralled. She should have been like drawn into the messaging. And here's this industry saying, hey, you should do it this way. And what I was doing was complete BS. And so that's when I went down a really deep rabbit hole around neuroscience, cognitive behavior, what drives true behavior change, and applied it to my work. And then that I started climbing the corporate ladder, realized that really wasn't for me, and then I started TrackableMed back in 2011.
Those early days, anyone who's done this knows this. Those early days come with challenges. There's nothing easy about starting, launching any of the things that you do when you start Trackable Med. What are some of the most valuable lessons you learned early on in that process?
I would say it's really related to what do you actually believe. If you are going into business to try to make a buck, or if you're going into business because it just seems like a cool opportunity, I don't believe that gives you the mass needed to have the inertia to blow through the little barriers that pop up. So lessons learned were, for myself, plus it was kind of interesting because I studied human behavior, is really understand what is the why behind what I'm doing. Because if you understand your why, then the how becomes way more powerful. And the little things that would trip me up and might, derail someone, it's not going to derail me because I know the bigger picture, or I have the understanding of what I'm truly trying to accomplish. And I believe it just gives you tremendous inertia. I remember there was, so I started the business and I didn't go for loans. I didn't do any of that stuff. It was just, hey, let's figure this out. Let's make this work. So I got a $5,000 limit credit card from a bank. I had my wife get a $5,000 limit credit card from the same bank. I would use that to kind of get the business going, and I'd have to sell cash flow and getting it to work. And I asked my wife to sell her car and get a car that she didn't like, and all this stuff, And our damn dog at the time ate basically a case of compact discs. So this is like 2011 and a half. Here's this puppy eating CDs. And I'm going, oh my God, like, what? Okay. And, it didn't go well. So she needed emergency surgery. The surgery was like $6,000. It's the last thing they would ever plan on spending. And I just remember driving to the vet. I have two boys, so there wasn't this like, well, we're just not going to do it. That wasn't an option. And so I just knew that it was going to work out. We're going to figure it out. And it's because of the whys. It's not I just think that that's the most important lesson. If you understand how important the why is that we're working on, we're going to run into roadblocks, and it gives you the power to blow through them. And the dog turned out fine. Although I was pretty frustrated with the vet because after this bill, you pay in advance. Vets are smart. And so you pay in advance. And then we go to pick up the dog and they go, oh, we ended up using a little bit more Tylenol. You owe $62.47. It's like, son of a, yeah.
I'm going to loop you in at this point, Cullen, because I
Yeah.
know based on conversations we've had that the why purpose is
Yeah.
really important. I'll let you run with that a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I'm fortunate to know Zed's story and see what they've been able to create as an organization. But what's interesting to me, and there's so many stories that he has to tell in terms of that or those early days. But it is this like it is the why, but it's also beneath that. I refuse to fail. Right, like if you really drill down into what was going on with Zed, and there's stories that he can tell about deals that he sold, that he got done, and he came out, and everybody's like, "Well, how are we gonna do?" He's like, "Well, I don't know that yet. We had to sell it, close it. I got the check. We'll figure out how in a second. I know why we're doing this, and I refuse to fail." And so, to me, the reason that Zed's been able to do what he's been able to do, and the team that he surrounds himself with is this refusal to do that. That does come back to this idea of the why and the purpose, because it's like if that matters to you in the way that you say that it does, and if it connects to you at a deep spiritual, soul, bones, DNA kind of level, cosmic, whatever your thing is, you're going to keep going even with the $6,000 vet bill when your line of credit. If you did that math, guys, he took up 60% of his line of credit. And then a little bit more with the additional Tylenol with one vet bill in terms of what was possible at that point in time. But it is this ability to connect to that. But I see a lot of entrepreneurs, that do that. And this probably take us to some of the next sections where they get lost in a how. They say they have a why around this thing, but it is not something that they have like fully committed to in terms of the way they're going to go after it. And that there's this, we are going to win. We are going to figure it out. We are going, because quite frankly, as we step forward, if Zed doesn't have that, then guess what? This company doesn't make it to this point. All the stats on companies and how long they last, stuff like that. There's been 14 other versions of that moment that looked and sounded different than they were in the beginning, but it was that beginning moment that allowed the rest to be able to be handled.
So let's take that and run with that. I'm going to toss this back over to you, Zed, for a second. Looking back, is there like a pivotal decision, a pivotal moment that sticks out to you where you made a choice that was either going to set you on the right trajectory or it was going to tank you early on?
Yeah, I think there was a point where, we had done some things. We pulled our kids out of private school. Like I said, I had my wife sell her car. Hey, we're hunkering down, and I kind of saw that as proof to myself. Like, if I'm willing to do this, that also means we are going to go get this done. And at the same time, you're selling, and it's just not catching fire yet. It's, you get right up to it, and it kind of backs away. Get right up to it, and backs away. And there was a conference with a medical device company that would be really valuable for me to talk to all the people there. The thing is the company was new. I knew one or two people at this company, but I didn't know enough to be invited. And I just said, this is going to sound weird at first, but hang with me, is I do this little trick in my own head where if I ever catch myself asking if something can be done, I'll kind of put something horrible in my mind. Like, if someone had a gun against like one of my kids' heads and you ask, can it be done? I'd be like, it can be done, right? If, you may not like how you have to get it done, but the thing is it can be done. So once you get your head over the idea of can it or can't it, then you can get in the creative mode of, okay, how do we make this happen? So I did a little research. I found out where this meeting was. Didn't have a lot of cash, but I went ahead and booked a hotel room at the same hotel, and I just put myself there. And I went to the bar and hung out, waited for people to show up, just started conversations. I didn't go with enough clothes. I had to go to, I think it was a Nordstrom's, and buy more clothing to stay, and I had to stay extra days. And I ended up getting invited to speak at their meeting. And that was not, I wasn't going there to speak at the meeting. I was going there because I knew there'd be value if I was there. And if I could put myself in the right scenario, that something would come from it. And it turns out that was a huge impact on the business, because basically I got in front of 100 or so potential referral sources for us. And I got a full hour and a half to talk to them. I won the crowd over. And that really rocketed the business like the second I got back from that meeting. If that had not gone well, it really would have put me in a bad spot, because I put my entire focus there. I put every bit of investment in getting there and staying there, and still pretending like I could afford to wine and dine people. And so it would not have gone well if that did not work out.
That actually leads me back to a question for you, Cullen. Zed talked about his ability to hunker down, which I think is probably a lost art for a lot of entrepreneurs. They don't want to have to do that. And then putting yourself in proximity to opportunity. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting you say this, and I'm not usually the old guy, young guy thing. That's not really the game that I want to play. But I do think there's something to be said for, as I watch some of our newer leaders and newer founders and stuff like that are having success. There's or starting businesses, because of the way in which they've grown and their access to information and stuff like that. There's this idea of kind of weathering that storm and kind of going through that is something that we have to spend a little bit of time on. Again, I'm not saying that they're not capable. It's just there's just a way of operating now that is much more instant in terms of answers and so on and so forth. The other piece is understanding what it looks like financially, because for so many early stage owners, founders, stuff like that, they really haven't had to figure out how to stretch that out. And so managing that resource, which is becoming, interesting, especially in this time, because money's got more expensive. For a long time, money was really, really cheap. Well, now the cost of money is a real cost of the business. So really thinking through that in terms of what they've got to do and how they're going to manage that becomes important. So for me, there's the discipline of, hey, this is going to take more time. I was listening, actually, I had an incredible founder and leader that I was mentored by that created literally billions of dollars in shareholder value. He was a private investor that I worked with in the early part of my career, just passed recently, Cam Lanier. And I was listening to a TED Talk he did the other day, just reminiscing about him. And he said, every deal we look at, we make private investments. And this was, them writing $5 to $50 million checks. So this is not small potatoes. And this was them writing. I'm not writing somebody else's check. He said, we always said, does it still work if it takes twice as long and twice as much money? Because in the hundreds of deals we've done, we've had 2 or 3 that didn't require twice as long and twice as much money. So I think that's great counsel from a man who did some great things in his life. So that's the first piece. Second piece on proximity, absolutely, right? The ability to be connected to, not because of your ego and you want to be like, oh, I want to be in the cool room. No, there is moments in terms of your business that are 1,000 times more valuable than the next. And having enough awareness to be able to step into those. And so you heard Zed talk about, if I'm at this event, it's like a vortex, a portal to another possibility for us as a business, and be able to recognize that's where I have to go. And they don't all work out like that, but you got to take some of those swings for that to happen. So proximity in terms of the right people. And let me say this about that as well. Sometimes everybody thinks it's the most senior person with the biggest title. Oftentimes you will find in these situations, there is a decision maker, a level or 2 down, or 3 or 7, that is incredibly important to you in terms of being able to help you move forward with whatever initiative you're going after. So don't get lost on it. It has to be some C-suite or some EVP. I can't tell you the number of times there's been an executive admin or somebody that's at a director level of an organization that has been incredibly valuable to an initiative we were after. So proximity is not always senior in focus.
Fantastic. Zed, I'm gonna send this back your direction here. The way that we lead our businesses when we launch them and when things are just getting off the ground is very different than the way we have to show up as leaders once they start to grow. Comes with growing pains, comes with all the things people might expect. How do you run your business differently today than when you first started?
I would say with the biggest thing would be understanding everyone else needs more certainty than I do. So I'm okay being set off in a direction and figuring it out. And I think early on mistakes I made would be related to assuming that others were or should be okay with that as well. And I think from a standpoint of leading it differently, it's understanding people's perspectives and what they have to see, feel, and hear so that they have the same passion that I do to achieve an outcome, but they're also like psychologically safe with the idea and are, don't feel like they're in a place of uncertainty or risk to them or their family. I think that would be the number one.
I'm gonna keep going down this path with you for a second. Everybody likes to talk about accountability. It's a very popular word right now, but when they have to hold people accountable, it can be really challenging, especially for the reason you just talked about. It involves other people, and you want to create a safe space for them. And sometimes accountability doesn't feel safe. What does accountability look like in your business as you lead?
So at first, I'd probably push back on that. I would say accountability is what feels safe. And it's probably, I guess, just how people are defining accountability. I don't really think you can hold someone accountable. We can go down a whole psychological aspect of this, but even saying I have to do this, like that's victim BS language. Like, no, you don't. You don't have to. And so trying to hold someone accountable in the sense of force your hand or sometimes I think people, they mix that up with micromanage. And to me, micromanaging is I don't trust you to do something, and then I'm going to show you I don't trust you because I'm going to ask you to prove that you did it because I think you probably didn't. And that's what I think sometimes people think accountability is. And I don't believe that. Accountability is, here is a clear set of things that this group of people is trusting you to either accomplish or figure out how to accomplish. And if you have the right values set up in the business and you have the right touch points in communication, then the people will keep themselves accountable to those things. It's just like, if people start complaining about accountability and they have kids, I'll ask, if your kid does something that you really are not happy with, you probably don't say anything about it, right? Well, no, I immediately we have a discussion. Well, why? Well, because it's really important. Okay, so you're holding them accountable. Yeah, it's because you love them. Like if you didn't love them, you just go let them, do whatever. So that's why I think accountability is related to being safe, and it's just about communication, structure, understanding, standards. What is okay here? Like what is the thing that is supposed to be? So I would say that's accountability in this organization.
Cullen, anything you want to layer on top of that or add to it?
It's what is it? I say this as I live here in South Louisiana, so not former LSU graduate, so it's hard to say these things sometimes. But Coach Saban, in all those years, I remember at one point that at Alabama said, great players want to be coached, right? And so, like, I think about that in terms of my own life, my own growth, the clients we're fortunate to get to work with and stuff like that. And great players want to be coached. And part of coaching is being accountable to the things that we did do and the things that we didn't, and learning from both, right? That's the other piece of this equation. This is not a perfection game. So for me, sometimes accountability is like, "Ooh, we're going to catch you. We're going to catch you. Like we're trying to set you up." It's like the principal at school when I was in grade school that didn't like me so much or something like that. Like, it's like, come on, that's not what this is about. This is about, to Zed's point, setting a standard, expecting you to hit that standard. And when you don't, let's have a conversation about why that happened. Was that lack of planning? Was the standard too high? Did we miss on that thing? Is this something where you need some training on something? Have we not zeroed in on that? What's the cause of that? And again, it's not making you bad or wrong. It's about, this is how we operate as an organization. This is the pace with which we move. And so it just creates that in the business. And quite frankly, some of our highest performing clients and teams are the most accountable, and they enjoy it, and they push each other, and it's hard, and they have tough conversations, but they also have a really good time working together because they're doing shit other people don't get done, because they're willing to do what's required. They're going to push through those moments. And so if you're shrinking back from that, I would just ask why. What is the thing that's in the way in you that doesn't want to have that happen? And then if you are an owner or leader who's allowing that in your organization, why? Why are you allowing that to be part of the culture that you're creating from that standpoint? Because it's a fantastic environment to know how to win and what's expected of you. What a great place to be.
I think it could be a scenario where lack of trust is what can create the anti-accountability. And what's really interesting, I'm a big fan of every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. There's a lot of freedom in saying that, so that you own everything, right? If we can tweak the system, we can tweak the outcome. Trust, or I should say distrust, is defined as something that is important to me is not safe with you. And if someone doesn't trust me, that means something that's important to them, they believe it's not safe with me. So if we have a lack of trust in the organization and you're also frustrated about accountability, I think you got to understand, what is it that's important to someone that they actually think is not safe with you? Because you wrap that up, the accountability is like the dominoes that will fall behind it. I just don't think it can happen without it.
Well said.
So I'm going to keep you guys both going down this path, because I think this leads us to the topic of delegation, like accountability, trust. And now as an owner or a leader, delegation pops in. A lot of cases, we didn't have to delegate a lot of things in the beginning because we didn't have anybody to delegate to. Now, all of a sudden, we have a team behind us of really talented people, and we're still holding on to stuff because we don't trust them. We don't want to let go of things. If there's one lesson you've learned on delegation, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the number one lesson would be to do it faster and do it more often. I would say that, coming up through working different jobs and then starting the business, I had a chip on my shoulder. Like I have to bear the weight of this. I have to get the most done. And I think it was just part of how I viewed myself. Like, to be successful, I must do this. And so if that's the case, you're not going to be very good at delegating. And once I got out of that mindset, I would say I kind of evolved from that idea in the sense of that's not true, and other people can be better at things. I mean, that's who we should be hiring, is people who are better than we are at these different tasks. So I would say the number one thing is do it faster and do it more often.
Cullen, how about you on your side as you're working with businesses and leaders? Where do you see the biggest gap in this?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that obviously we hear a lot, right? We're fortunate to get to work with teams that are having success, but there's a desire they're kind of stuck to some degree at some level. Things may be growing in some areas and not in others, but the people function is one that requires so much intentionality. And what I would say is delegation is not an event; it's a process, right? And so for a lot of people, when they think delegate, I tell them, joke with them and say, "Yeah, you play hot potato. You don't delegate. You don't figure out what you're handing off. You don't help that person understand what they're getting. You don't build the documentation necessary. You don't do the training. You don't do it while they watch you do it one time, and then you watch them do it one time, and then we actually have to hand it off." So that's the first piece. Delegation, it takes some intentionality as far as doing, and it takes more time than doing it yourself. Let me say that again. It takes more time than doing it yourself. So what happens is most of the entrepreneurs and leaders and owners get caught in this cycle of, when I have time, I'll do it. The problem is you never get off that treadmill, right? So it's a challenge because it's like, hey, I'm already pretty maxed out. I'm like, I get it, but that doesn't change unless we take this on. So that's really the first piece on the delegation side. The other piece is like, to Zed's point, we should be looking for people that are actually better than us. At some point, we are not the smartest because we're like the genius, but like we know more about the business. And over time, there's this weird feeling about somebody who's in the finance seat or the ops seat or the marketing seat, knowing more about the business than we do in that role, even though we have ultimate risk as owners and ultimate, responsibility in terms of the business. But there is this point at which it's like, wait a minute, the people on my team at some point are going to be more talented, more capable, and I'm not going to know everything to the degree that I've known it since we started. And so it's a really quite a shift mentally in terms of how to move through that. So that's the thing that we see in terms of delegation, is the time involved and this idea that handing it off is part of it, and you are going to lose some level of, not all visibility, but you're not going to be as close to every detail as you were previously once that starts to happen, right? But that is how we actually develop talent. So if you want to be able to continue to grow, and here's the last thing. To Zed's point, so many of the entrepreneurs and owners kind of wear that badge. Like, I'll work harder than anybody else. I'm going to go. I can work 27 hours a day, because it took a lot in the beginning, right? There's this mentality there. And they don't really know what they're going to do with the time exactly once they get it. What I can tell you is there is things you will do that no one else can do with the margin that gets created. I was with a bank CEO last week, interviewed him, and he said, Cullen, he said, I've gotten 4 to 5 hours of my week back since implementing some of the things that we've done. And he goes, and it's crazy what I'm using that on now compared to what I was doing before. I didn't even know how I was going to use it. First off, I didn't believe that was going to happen, number one. Number two, once it did happen, where I'm putting that as far as my strategic thinking and my vision, he goes, I'm having to create some space, but it's not this busyness work. It's a different kind of creation. And it really reawakens something for so many of our entrepreneurs. But it's not a simple thing to do mentally, and even kind of like just, psychologically, and just kind of in your own, you just feel a little bit, it just feels weird. And I don't know the other way to say it.
So Zed, from your perspective on that, what have you been able to do with the time you get back by delegating? What does that free you up to do?
So, and this is actually, this aspect is really recent. I've basically turned Mondays into a pure strategic zero plan day. And that's very different than probably I've had my entire life. Monday was kind of like let's go, let's, get in the weeds. And it has been awesome to just not have anything planned, no tasks that I have to complete. I'm not answering emails. I don't have meetings scheduled on my calendar. And I've just been able to get back to thinking creatively about the business. And it's funny because all this stuff ends up being a habit. And we work with a lot of private practice medical practices. And think about a physician business owner. What do? They get there early and boom, they start seeing patients. And then they got to follow up and they got to do paperwork and they got to do the notes and this and that. And then the next day, boom, they're seeing patients. And what are some of the least strategically driven businesses, private medical practices? It's not because the people don't have the ability. It's their world is actually set up to be whack-a-mole every single minute of every day. And I'll end up fading into that. And then I'll go, what the hell am I doing? Let me get this off my plate and really schedule the time to just think. And what you have to be okay with is not explaining that to other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm probably not going to tell my wife that I schedule a day to think. She'd be like, well, just come home. Just take the day off. That's not what it is, right? But it's just it's hard to explain to people, but it's valuable.
Well, Zed, I'm curious your thought on this, because to me, people dismiss that as not being work, right? And when I think about when you founded the business, there were moments of inspiration that became what exists today. Well, why is that any different now? When you thought a lot when you were first founding this business and you had a whole $10,000 worth of credit card capacity available
Right.
to you, you thought there was a lot because you had more time because you didn't have any clients, stuff like that. So there was that's what birthed this entire thing. Well, now you have a real business with real employees, all kinds of stuff. We still need that ability to do it, but people couch that not as work. And the other thing that I always say to folks like yourselves and even to myself, running my business, is who else is going to do that if I don't do it?
Yeah.
Nobody, because nobody else can step into that role, period. So it just doesn't get done. And that's where we see this, this frustration thing happen. But I'm telling you, I think there's a real issue with people thinking that thinking time, that planning time, that strategy time is somehow not work. I'm like, no. That is probably some of the most important work, if not, that you're going to do this quarter, this month, this year.
Yeah, I think it's what makes it so that people, from a competitive aspect, if you were invested in a company, would you rather invest in a company where the business owner had their head down and was grinding every day? Or would you want to invest in the company where the business owner set time to think strategically about what tomorrow, next year, 5 years looks like? Yeah. I mean, what's so funny is the answer is so damn obvious, but then we go do the head down grind thing.
Yeah.
Well, part of it, to your point, though, is we're worried about what people are going to think. I started probably a year ago. I started to schedule these 2-hour time blocks that had nothing on them. I'm going to sit in a room and I'm going to think, and I'm going to journal and I'm going to walk through where I think we can go. I didn't tell my business partners I was doing that. Like, it was just on the calendar, but I didn't tell anybody that that's what I was doing because I was worried about what people were going to think. Were they going to think I was wasting time and not working? And that was a big piece of it. So, yeah, absolutely. And that time too, I think there's a lot of distractions as an entrepreneur and as a leader that take us away from that thinking time. One of them that I see right now that's a big deal, and I'm curious what your take on this is you've got data and metrics all over that you can pay attention to. Like, as an owner, there is more information at our fingertips than ever before, but I think we get stuck in what we should actually pay attention to. Like, what's your experience with that, Ben?
Yeah, the data thing it's so funny because we get questions from clients and we have to spend time with our people to chill before responding, because we had an example just last week where I'm witnessing the communication of a client amongst, people within that organization. And someone says, hey, everything's looking good, but I noticed our cancellation rate. We have a lot more appointment cancellations. And this was on an email to a bunch of people. And you saw the firestorms, like, oh man, well, what we should do is we should create a script about this. And hey, Bill, can you check into this? And all this stuff, all this activity. And no one sat down and said, your overall appointments are up. Is this just the same percentage? Which it was. And they didn't also take into account that the way the system was set up, their system labels it a cancellation even if the patient rebooks. So if you're running around with your hair cut on fire because of a cancellation, but that patient rescheduled, is this a bad thing? And so that's where I think the problem is. You get access to data and you can go crazy. So I really like the process of, if someone wants to look something up or if they're curious about a number, I love curiosity, but just what is the problem statement first? So state it as a problem. Hey, the problem is we can't have an increase in patient cancellations. Great. That's perfect. What data will I need to uncover what decision I'm going to make? And what is the consequence of that decision? And how does that data support that decision? And if you can answer all those questions, then you don't go down the crazy rabbit hole of wondering some data piece that you'll never use. And so a question we always ask internally is, first of all, someone's going to hey, can we find out blah, blah, blah? We probably can. Once you know that answer, or let's pretend you already do, what are you going to do about it? And if you can't answer it, then we shouldn't go waste the time on the data. If you can answer it and it's not that important, then ask yourself, is there a bigger consequence that's out there that maybe it does make sense for us to do? But I do think data it can be a total distraction. You can go down, 19 rabbit holes and not actually get anywhere.
Cullen, where do you see that with your clients?
Yeah. So the one thing that comes up for me a lot is, what's a numerator? What's a denominator? Old school fractions. Let's go back to grade school. I was with a client not too long ago, and there was a team that was talking about, sales team was saying this was all effed up and screwed up, and these have to be done, and it was all about some deliveries, and so okay, last week, do we have this documented somewhere in terms of, because sometimes without the data, we start to get into these conversations. We probably they, us, it's all screwed up, blah 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 blah. So I was like, how many orders were truly screwed up last week? And we pulled it up, 9. Great. How many orders did we do last week? 1,021. I was like, okay, so out of 1,021 orders, we had 9 that were totally foobarred. I understand we care about those 9, but let's recognize we had 1,012 successful orders delivered. I'd say that's pretty good considering we're running trucks and people and warehouses and we're delivering to job sites and everything else. So let's chill for a minute in terms of that. So to me, there is the data piece to Zed's point. And sometimes it's about stopping the conversation to go get whatever data because the problem has been identified. And I always love understanding, because again, I just see people paint with broad brushstrokes here where it's not effective. And then we're operating what I like to call kind of an augmented reality. It's like they put on the augmented reality goggles and now we're looking at the world through these lenses, and that's not really what's going on in the business, but that's what we're saying and that's what we're perpetuating and that's what we're driving internally. And then that has a way of becoming self-fulfilling prophecy if you're not careful.
Well, because everybody speaks truth. Like everybody's perspective is truth.
Right.
And you can have 4 different truths around the same fact. And so if you do just go down these rabbit holes, or like you said, you make these broad strokes, you can be right and still be very wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you just let that happen, it's really, I wish I had learned, I learned that through experience and getting stung. I would say, I didn't go to official college, but I've had plenty of college costing educational moments in my business career, and that's where this stuff comes from. Is you go down a path, and it's because you believe something. So now your eyes can only see the facts that justify what you believe, and you were brushing with a broad stroke, and then you realize you wasted all this time, potentially money, and maybe even put yourself at risk, and you weren't right. It wasn't actually factual.
Yeah, and this gets one final thing on this, John. To me, it makes me even think about Zed's example of the cancellation. Maybe there was a strategic choice by one of the folks that said, hey, we're getting on the phone with too many people. We need to up the level of the filter, and we need to start pushing more out. Well, what is more, and what is the plan of that? And was that communicated to the other people down the stream so they didn't go, oh my God, we have more cancellations? And it's like, exactly. That's what we are. Or, we had people, exactly. We're trying to make sure we have the right people coming into the practice. And so there's a filtering mechanism that's going to cause more of that to come out. So we only spend time with patients in this scenario where there's a high likelihood they're a good candidate for our service. So maybe this was exactly what we were looking for, but it wasn't shared, and we didn't set the measurement out clearly enough about what we're expecting, so we have something to push against. It's just more cancellations. Bad. Maybe.
So Zed, I'm going to come back to you with a question that I asked in the beginning. In the beginning of this conversation, I asked you, what's a decision or a significant impact point in the beginning of launching that changed the trajectory for you? Let's fast forward to like within the last 6 months, last year. What's a decision you made recently that's done that same thing for you?
Physician Growth Accelerator. And so, the company was built. I built the company on the idea that if we pay attention to neuroscience and human behavior, we can run a business that drives ideal patient throughput. And one of the first constraints I ran into was medical office phones. And, it's Agnes who hates her life that's answering the phone at the medical office and just bludgeoning the poor patient to death so they don't want to come in. And so we created a service where we have our own call center and we book the appointments. Great. Overcome that constraint. The problem is there's still this entire practice the patient has to go through. And it's kind of like, imagine my son, my 16-year-old, he loves brownies. I mean, what 16-year-old doesn't? But so let's say you have the perfect brownie recipe. And every time you make it, it is just perfect. And then you give it to 10 other people and they all make it and none of them like it. And it's because one is burnt and one is undercooked and one is this. And it turns out that the variations between the cookware they used and the oven impacted the output of what your recipe was. And that's what I was witnessing happening here at TrackableMed is we were giving everybody this brownie recipe, and some people came out with delicious brownies. Some people came out with stuff they didn't really like. And so I realized that we really needed to own everything within the practice. And so the Physician Growth Accelerator was born as a consulting model to really uncover constraints within the practice and help them fix those things so that their damn brownies would taste good. And it's a big, big shift. It's, the company being over 10 years old and making that kind of a strategic shift is significant, but man, is it exciting. And it's just, it's going to be huge. It's incredible.
What's the biggest challenge in making a shift like that? Because I feel like 10 years in, it'd be easy to just status quo and just keep going down the path you're on and not deviate. What's the biggest hurdle?
The team believing as much as me, I would say. The going back to uncertainty, me being okay with that, and realizing that not everybody's going to have the same level of comfort with uncertainty. And so it was about did I believe that I could make the case and have the people who really need to be a part of this continue to just push as hard, be as passionate, put in as much effort as before, and even more, and deal with the suck. Because, it's not like you're just like, hey, we're bolting a turbo onto the car. It works right away. That doesn't work that way. We're basically taking the car apart and turning it into a helicopter, right? So it's basically getting the team to see the vision as well.
Which is a perfect segue. My next question was going to be about being a visionary and what that looks like. I'm going to flip it over to you, Cullen. Where do you see visionaries like Zed at play in businesses, and where do they fall short?
Yeah, so I'll get to that, and I think it ties back to this component that Zed's talking about right now, and this transition and the ability to do that, and for the team to understand, especially in a business that's been around for a minute and has got core customers and core products and stuff like that. It's not like as this became a reality and Zed made his decision, obviously with counsel and looking at the market and stuff like that, that somehow he flipped a switch and it's off we go, and now it's working. number one, we still have a core business to run and core customer to serve, and we can't ignore that and just put all of our energy here. And so while we may be saying, hey, this is something we're going to continue to offer, we're going to maybe do it in a different way. Well, the customer doesn't understand that right away, and so I see a lot of teams struggle with that. So once the team gets good, they don't understand how we still got to transition our period through this. This transitional period is a big one. And to me, getting back to your question about the visionary, this is where sometimes our visionaries can share, the people that are in that role, they share at one time and they're like, all right, I've told everybody. And I'm like, I hear you. This is going to take a minute, like prepare for it like weekly and monthly, because while your brain has shifted and you've been given that God-given ability, not everybody has that, and they need to hear it more than once and be reminded of what's happening. And so for our visionaries, that's the first piece. The second piece is you don't get to do this all the time. And so you got to be careful as it relates to these kinds of pivots in the business, because it will become, if you're ideating onto your team and you're kind of like just regurgitating all that and just kind of like spewing that onto them, they're not a visionary founder for a reason. They're incredibly valuable people, glad that part of the team. Their brain doesn't work the same, and you will lock them up, right? One of the things that I had, when I was building and running a business, I had a business partner who was incredible at creating ideas, but I would watch my team get locked up because everything he would share, they thought was a new directive. And I'm like, no. He's just talking out loud and spewing ideas. Half of those are garbage. Actually, 90% of them are garbage. There's going to be some gold in there. I need you to not pay. And I had to say to him, hey, man, like, you don't understand the gravity of your words when you say this stuff. So we've got to stay on point and on task. And even if we see new opportunity, we got to pick and choose when and how we share that. So that's one of the other challenges from a visionary standpoint, because a lot of them take pride in the ideas, it's an amazing skill, but it can also be very dangerous for an organization, especially if we don't have the right structure in place to manage that and the right amount of resources, right? Because we have finite people and finite resources to go after that. So it's something we really have to watch. What I notice is, as long as clients start to see that those things have a place to land, it settles the energy down. The concern is, I'm going to forget, so I got to tell a bunch of people so we don't forget. The problem is there's just these carcasses of ideas spread all over the office, and then it just becomes noise eventually.
There you go. As we get ready to land this, Zed, what's one lesson, if you could rewind to go back to your younger self, what's one lesson you wish you had picked up early on, that would have saved you some time, trouble, and hassle as you were getting ready to launch these businesses?
With as much belief and as much of an understanding of the why, I would say there was probably some mentally wasted time around, like, is this a good idea? Like that questioning that pops in, and just being so, even more so, of just plow, because there's no, like, what bad is going to go happen? I mean, it's just, it is what it is. So any kind of stalling, I would say, if I could go back and think about, like, just take action. And then also from just a skill set standpoint, there was a lot of things in business that I understood and could wrap my head around. I could have used debt better. Like, that's a super specific thing, but I cash flowed the business forever, and it was really healthy. And, so we're always in a good position, but I probably slowed down our ability to grow because of that. And so I think that's, things from being around other business owners and witnessing what people have done. And it just came from I was debt adverse just as a person. The idea that someone had something on me, I just wasn't, a fan of. But I didn't really see it as a tool. And then, moving to the idea of understanding it as a tool, that could have been beneficial early on. One thing I would say that I stuck with, that I'm super glad, and this was just on accident, is single business owner, no partners. I heard probably one of my favorite quotes about a business partner ever, from someone I'm friends with, and he said, the only time you want a partner is if you're in a bowl of shit eating contest and he's a faster eater.
So this has been an awesome conversation, you guys, both of you. It's exactly what I was hoping for when we started talking about having a first guest on. If somebody got value out of this, which I guarantee people did, and they want to find you, Zed, first, where can they find you?
Probably easiest is LinkedIn. Pretty active on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. You can find the website Store Businesses. If they're a physician and they want to kind of identify constraints within their practice, go to physiciangrowthaccelerator.com.
Awesome. And Cullen, if somebody's listening to this and they're in a position just like Zed, a business owner going through all of the ups and downs of running a business from launch to growth and everything in between, and they want to engage with a firm like Exit Momentum, what does that look like?
Yeah, so connect with us directly at exitmomentum.com. We've got a number of resources there for you to plug into. One of our core values is to deliver value with every interaction, and that's digital as well. We want to make sure we're delivering value, not just trying to sell you some stuff. So we believe that happens naturally. So there's several things that you can download there, depending on what you're looking for. There's also an ability to jump on a call with one of our coaches and walk through an assessment of where you are to help you see some things. And again, our job there is to make sure we help you see that from that standpoint. And then lastly, there are quite a number of videos as well from clients talking about their experience. And I feel like sometimes one of the most valuable things you can have is just hearing from your peers, listening and looking for similarities and looking for things that are different. So there's also that resource as well. But we'd love to have a chance to visit with you if it makes sense at exitmomentum.com.
There you go. All right, this was, like I said, fantastic conversation, you guys. I appreciate you both for taking the time to do this. And I personally got a ton out of this conversation. So thank you both for what you shared today.
Fantastic.
Thank you.